seems to be an important spot here. All right. So where I got to was on page Resh Ayin Aleph. That's what I have. A number Nun Aleph. So we'll do what we can here. So this would be Nun Aleph. Here's down the bottom. He says, let me go back one. Let me go back to number Ayin Resh, so we get a little bit. He says, Be'esa Dormita, at the time of the Dormita, Choseris the Nuk the Bechinis the Kuda. That was what we did the last time. Okay, then it goes on. I'm just going to read the dark print. Nimsa ki kamosha zer anpen choser lebidazo rishonim. He goes back to his original size. Let's see what he's saying. Kain nukva achar asher hegdila ach ba'ach parts of shalom kenisker. Now she's a complete backside. So she goes back to her original size. So Rishonim out of the Yosef Besod Nakuda Katan, she comes back to be a little dot. How's this happen? Ayideh follows a tardema, as we know, on Zer Anpin, and the Mochin are going to go into the Nook. V'lechein Atacha Nikras Tzela, so therefore now she's called a rib. V'lo Partziv. V'zech she'amcha kosav v'yikach achaz metzalosav. So that was, I want to read number Nun in the TIV Kabanos, and then we'll go on from there. This is the meaning of this phrase. Kosav v'yikach achaz metzalosav shene'emer be'ez hadormita the Marisha. The Kevin Sha'az Choseres Hanuk, the Bechinas Kat Nusa, the Yos Besod Nakuda Hanikra Salam. So he adds here, Atan is Ba'ara Tevis Hamapel Hevle Shena al Enai Usnuma al Fapai Shehakubana al Siluk HaMochem is their anpin also, and from the Nook. He said, the Vayr Tevis and Meir Leishan Bas Ayin, and that's that phrase at the end. He says, what's that all about? He said, but before we get into that, I guess, he's saying that he wants to talk about the Hamshacha, the Mochim, and the Asa B'Shasa Dormita that is done at the time of the Dormita. Sha'al Inyan Zecher Romzim Tevis Halalu. So that's really what we're talking about. Let's come over a little bit. And so let's go back over here. I don't know, so I made a little mess over here. I'm not sure in my book, but let's look at there we go. The Shefa Kavanos here on page number Kaf Vav, where it began V'nimsa ki kamosha zer anpet chaza the bidasa rishona came nukva achar asher higdila ach ba'ach parts of shalom, etc. Let's go on, and this becomes a nikuda katana. Hiksha Mefarshim, but there's a problem here for the Mefarshim, particularly Shem and Sason, he says. So every place we actually learn the opposite. Not that she goes back to become a dot, but rather that she grows up to her full height. And I think we've gotten an answer to this in other places. I don't think that's necessarily what we're going to hear here. Katana Kamosha Hoyu Be'ez Hadormita, like she was at the time of the deep sleep. Choseres and Nuklihiyot Bebechina Dekuda. Avira saw that the Saw explains like this. It can't be both things. It can't be that she's a little dot, or that she's complete the whole height of their anpen. So he says Sheyesh Ezer Zaman. Bein histalkul shalom mochem is there anpin be'esadar mitach bein knisas anai de'imak v'nuk. There's some time in between that. V'oz ba'ozach azman. At that time, since their anpin is losing everything, there's a space of time where he's not being mashpia to her. So then she becomes a dot. I guess what he wants to say. V'oz ba'ozach azman mistalkim v'menach v'mochem shemeir b'zer anpin. So now you see that the mochem leave. So he wants to say that there's a sequencing here, and we have to follow that sequencing. Mosvim Divrich Ravkan. So it's that time in between. That's according to the Shem and Sason. I think that was Shem and Sason. Kan Sha'oz he Naktanis should become smaller. V'chozeres the Bechina de Kuda again because there's nothing shining on her. V'arein la'achar mikan. But then Chozeres his Gadol. Now she has the mochin, the nai, the ima coming into her, niknatzim, bother come into her, v'chein kazu harav. The hedya, b'shar pesukim, hey vir Hashem and Sason. So then we saw that over here. Now we're going to keep going on. I said it was going to go on, so we're going to do number Nun Aleph in the TIV Hakavanot. And we'll read through this a little bit. 1 second. Okay, we'll read through this a little bit. So number Nun Aleph. V'achashed is mat, and now she's nasrach ma'atzach ma'ach roch v'ha'alo osach v'malach neged upon and she takes her from around, I guess, is around the back, and she now she lifts up until she's now on the face side of Zera Anpin v'oz heyruba erik Anpin v'tashlim tikuna, and then she becomes completed. Now, I'm not sure what he means by Tashlim Tikuna, but I think he means, what he means is, she's the same height as Zer Anpen on the front. V'higdilu uvno binyan shalem, so now we have a complete building of the nook. Kamo shechoya baila b'techila, like the same height as her husband. That would be the male aspect at the same time. V'nimsa adach shenechem shavim mamish zecha kezecha b'ada v'chava. So now he uses the phrase ada v'chava. He writes like this. Achar sheyotzin amochim mizer anpin v'chanuk mizmad l'kaduna katana. Okay, this is where we've been going over. Nasim kamatikunim b'nuk. There's a bunch of things that happened over here by the nook. Techila niknasim anai the ima mochin the ach shebechem the nook. The purpose of this is to build up her backside. Bona the sochel mashlim and the sochel the essence of fear is v'hu adaim binyan kumas ach shalom. But what we have here is the same height, but it's the same height of her acharayim. And then after this, they go up into the womb of the bosom, that's it, of Abba V'imba Mizdavgim Sham, and a yichud takes place. Why do we need a yichud there? You have to go backwards in what we were learning. Mizdavgim Sham Zivav Debia Rishona. Shein Yanim Bavur La'el. We saw this over previously, where it was number Daled and Drush Gimel. Then he says, then after that, we got to this situation. Now there's another set of mochin that are come in. There's going to be the mochin depanim. And where does it come from? It comes from the nai, the ibach of the nuk, livnoises kumas epanim shalom. So now we have this concept. The yuin, but Meluins, apparently we went through the Meluim pretty much. Not that it was easy to understand, but we did go through it. So this sequencing where she became very small. Now she's going to start getting mochin upon him. Nasra, as a result of this, Nasra how does that actually work? How does it come out that she's Miss Nasser? He says, Shenik Nasim Anai, the Ima Mochan Shabacham El Tochanuk directly, Ubonim also, and they build her up. And then the Seres Bezer Anpin. Kevin she'ata chakuvor lo tzricha lekabel es shefa shelo mimenu. So now she's become independent of him. Kevin shemei kabbalah me'ima atzva. So because of the fact that when she receives from Ima herself, v'ha'ala ozel b'malach neged the panin de zer anpen lifts her up opposite the face of zer anpen. She's around his face now. They're looking there. I guess they're looking at each other. The zer anpen Hakavanot shenim shachin amochen the panin the nuk ma'anai the Ima. Now she has a different set of mochin. So these are the mochin the panim. Vaz heir ba Eric anpen vehishlim tikuna. So that's that phrase over there. He said v'chigdila overnacha b'binyan shalom k'moshe hoya baila b'techila. Now that phrase where it says that she's like her husband at the beginning, was that mean hainu the b'shnecham shachos hamochim, that is mochin the ach v'heim the panim hanim shachem alachem Eric anpen. And where do these mochin come from? Now that this requires a little bit more thinking, if you ask me. But he said, well, previously it's not going through Zer Anpin, it's going to come through Erech Anpin, which means it has to go through Abba Ve'ima, etc., to get down. Let's see how it goes. V'nevar binyan shalom k'moshe chosed baile b'techila dahaina de b'shnechem shachos. The shnechem shachos of the mochim heim the ach v'heim the panim. Eric Anpen al Ima, that come through Eric Anpen, come through Ima from Eric Anpen. Let's read it again. Eric Anpen al Ima. Okay, so in other words, there's some pneumistic aspect that is very strong here. Negdelas kumas hanuk hein kumas ha'ach ve'heim kumas ha'panim shalachem b'shar kumas zer anpen, as we're talking about, but b'shir, of the same size as zer anpen. V'nipsa ata shnechem, that is the zachar v'nuk mechana osam harav adam v'chava. So why he did that, the Tiv does not deal with that. But he calls them by the name of I call it the male and the female force, but that's me. He says Harav Adam Shabim Mimanu Zekazes, and now they're equivalent. And we're going to keep reading on. What time do we have until today?
Same time, 6:15.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you so much. Let's go to number Nun Bet, and we'll come back. We'll try to pick up the Shefa Gavanos. So he says, this is okay. That's the way he says her now he becomes mislavish and zer anpin, in the head of zer anpin. Now let's go through the sequence. So we went through there's a period there when there's a dormita. The nook becomes a dot for a certain amount of time, and then the mochin enter directly into the nook. And as a result of that, she grows up completely with mochin de la'ach. Then after that, it sounds like mochin de panim come into the nook, and she is able to then move around to the front side, or he's got to describe how it is. I saw this a little bit, so he's going to describe how it is that she actually, what's the power that moves her from this dot, so to speak. We'll see. So now that we have a hamshacha mocha into the nook, so leaves from her the naya of ima mochim shebechem v'choseres lekatnosa. We said that before. V'niknasim al tocha zer anpen. Now the mochin now to come directly into zer anpen dechasha the lahamshik lo hamochin the panim, that he should have, he gets mochin the panim. The mochin panim, the panim were not in the nook yet. The la'achim become mamshik zer anpen chalanok ha'aras hamochin the panim. So now he says that so this is a secondary light. It's to go through zer anpen. The mochin, the panim have to come to zer anpen first. V'al yedei kain nivnitz v'nishlam kumasa. So he said v'nimsa. So now that she has it, but she got it from Zah. Nimsiki oz, and what is it? It's a ha'ara rather than the light itself. It's coming filtered. V'nimsaki oz choyer shenechem panim b'panim. But what's happening is now this draws her face to face with him. La'achar shenimshchol l'mokam mochin d'panim choseres la'amod b'panim d'zer anpen. She goes back, and now she's standing in the front of zer anpen. Nimsa she'omdim adazun panim b'panim. So as a result of the mochin coming back into zer anpen, the mochin d'panim, that moves her, that the ha'ara from that moves her to the position of panim b'panim. Amachayim akosev nirala niazdaiti, he writes, Kizecha b'sod aliyas le'a lamala. Now this is like a something you have to think about here. I have to think about it. Commotion is boyer lecha b'drashim shekadmo. He's with the chem. He connected upon him mamish to their armpit. So now she is there opposite his face. So he said, "Ve'efshar she'achar kach." Now it's possible that after this, mischaveres im kalim derachel. Now this is a whole new idea. V'na'aseh shteichem parts of echad. So this is the whole deal. Let's see what he says. He's going to explain this. He said, "Mavur b'marcho dema shenizbar shebe'ez darmita niknasim amocha benok v'nigdelas call kumbas as their anpen, and she grows until she's the whole height of their anpen." Hakavanot, the parts of Leah. So what are we talking about here? This is the parts of Leah you're talking about. Leah is from the cause of the wall of their anpen. V'hu mamashin is boy la'el. So how do we understand this? He says this was in Drush Dalet. He says shemas chilin shemetachilas halayla v'an chitzos mishaelis rachel eskelechol laleah. Remember this idea that what you're really talking about, if you're talking about nighttime, which is what we're talking about, and sleep and so on and so forth, you're dealing with Leah, because Leah has taken all of the mochin from not of the spheres of Rachel and absorbed them into herself and stretched down the backside of Zeranpeh. The nikra of called parts of a nuk al shem Leah. So actually, that's what happens. Ubo mispashdim hamochim be'esadormita, and into those, that is the spheres of Leah, mochim be'esadormita ve'elach of Rachel. During this period of time, Yored is the Bria. She goes down. She goes out of Etzilus of Eza Zo Shir Kumas Anuk, and at this time, then the measurement of the height of the Nuk, who connected Kol Shir Kumas Azer Anpet. Let's read a little bit more. So he writes, "V'hiyoski Leah he acharayim de'ima," because this is also goes along with these ideas. Since Leah, to begin with, is an aspect of a higher parts of also, so therefore her natural tendency would be to go back up to her original place. Bahabin says, so he says, I want to give you a bracha, you should be able to understand this. Also parts of Anuk ad keneged Rosh Hashanah. So we want to say how in fact Rosh Hashanah. So he says, how is it that this actually happens? V'chalo makom amidus hanuk. So he said, because the place where the nuk stands, hu machachaza the mata is from the chest downward. So that's talking when he says the nuk, he's referring to Rachel. Lefi mashin is bayer ata the ayrega began parts of Leah. But wait a minute, it's not Rachel. Shemakom l'mala min hacha kenisker, which we understand for the hacha l'mala. That's where we find Leah. So therefore, he writes, Amidasa, her height, Keneged the Mala, Machachaza is going to be stretched all the way up to that area there. So let's, I think we could do one more. Let's say, Avad Sarak the Teda, you should know this. Ki yeshne bechinus shall panim bepanim. Really? Yeshnem shte bechinus of the Maisa. Lokamon. So as we go forward, he says Yizboyer Shehem Shlosha Bechinos. There's actually three of them. Shel Hamshachas Hamocha Depana the Noka Kufish Yizboyers. I'm going to get into that now. Not the Bekatsara the Yesh Shinui Ben Hamshachas Hamocha and the Ach. There's a difference between how the Mocha and the Ach flow, the Hamshachas Hamocha and Depanim. the Hamamochen the Achne Mishach and the Chida the Zer Anpin, for who knows in the Ara Shalachem Lanuk. That's the way the Mochen the Ak work. For Lacher Mekan, Mistalkim Amochem is Zer Anpin, you have the Tardema. Beis Adormita, he calls it. Now, V'niknasim Anai, the Ima Mochen Shebechem El Hanuk, they go into the Nuk and Mekabelas as Atzmas Amochem, and she's able to receive the whole essence of the Mochen. Avoh B'cham Shachas the Mochen the Ponim. But when we talk about that, Nemshachan the Mochen the Chila El Hanuk, the Mochen originally come into the Nuk V'oz Negdelas Keshir Kumas Zer Anpet. V'la'achar mekan mistalke b'mochen b'mena v'niktanis, and she becomes small, like that dot we said before, ad keneged the zah, and she grows up to that height. V'shuv nemshachin amochen dezah, for who knows in law as harasam, and he gives them to her. Now, I'm not 100% sure. We're going to come back to that again, and we'll look at it again in a minute, but let's go over to the where would I be here? The TIV Hakavanot, and we're on number Kaf Zion. Number Kaf Zion. Number Kaf Zion says like this. So now that she become into a dot, we did this again. We back over to that. We had the Shem and Sason. The guy gave us an explanation. Hamafarshim, that is the Yafter Shah here, the Oz Yud Dal and the Shem and Sason, Oz Yud Gimel, to Malchut Bazeh, they're wondering about this idea. Why? The Mashpech and B'divrich Harav, Shachan Nesira Na'asa Be'ez Shahanuk, he besod Nakuda Katana. So we said that's what's mashma from this, is that she was a Nakuda Katana. V'hu the lo ukafi hamavur b'kama makomos, and it's not like we normally hear this. Shachaseder hu she'achar she'nistalkel hamochem ezer anpen v'chozeres anuk lebechina dekuda niknazem anai de'iba benuk umagdilim ozacha b'kol kumas ezer anpen, they grow her up to the entire height of zer anpen. V'rak la'achar mekan, but only after this time. Na'asis on Nasira, that's only when the Nasira takes place. V'adar Rabbah, Hare Mavura Sham, it says over there, Shachan Nasira Na'asa Machmas Zeh Gufa Shenek Nasa Namochan Nenok Shalo Derech Zah. So what do we have? Al Ken Kavar and Nanos Sricha the Hios the Vukus, so she doesn't have to be still clinging to him. V'lechein and the Naseres Bimena, so therefore she becomes independent. Beam came Eich Omer Khan, so the problem is, how do we say over here? It sounds like she became independent while the Mochen are still not into her. So the Sada comes along and he explains it. Ubir Sada Huva B'Shari Rachmim Sham, he says Shachein Kachi Gam Kavanas Rav Khan. Now this sounds a lot like something we heard already. A rock bekitzer b'devarav, only he was mekatzer the words, and it was a short form. Below hisker es kadesis a mochen the imach al nook, and it doesn't get into that of how the mochen go into the nook first. Or the devarav kachi meshmos divrich rab, and the words are what? After she becomes minimized, Oz and the Nasser Hamamatsa Ma'achrav, that is when she is Menasser. Okay, so that didn't sound that interesting to me. Let's go to the next one, number Kaf Hey. Vos Hey Yerba Eric Anpen Vehishlim Tikuna. So then he says, Zer Anpin, that's that phrase over here. Now he's shining into her. Now, what's interesting about this is that since she became independent as a result of the direct penetration of the Nai of Ima into her, she grows up to be the whole Acharayim of Zer Anpin, the same size. Then she comes around to the front. Now, in other places, I thought that what happens is that the process of the relative size of the Acharayim to the size of the Panim is that she reverts back to, that's where I thought I saw someplace else, she reverts back to the size of a dot. Then she grows up. But here it seems slightly differently. He said, "Nimsa sheyeshnam shnei shachos mochim shal yadam nikdelas anuk le'esesphiros." And so what I was going to say is that over here, originally, she's getting her mochin, whatever she has, the ha'arif and the mochin that are inside of their anpen, and he's being mashpia to her. But in the end, the same thing happens, that she has to get her shefa, which is now shefa of yichud, of panim b'panim, she's getting it by herself. Through Zeranpin, just like the same as it was before. So let's go on. Nimsa sheyeshnam shneicham shachas mochim she'al yadam negdalas anuk le'eses spheros. He says the first one, the first one happens before there is a dormita. When she's standing in the position of being ach ba'ach im zer anpin, v'az mekabelas ha'aras ha'mochem zer anpin. V'nivnas as a spheros, she becomes 10 spheros. V'alshenin asa be'esa dormita, the other one, there's going to be a dormita though. Now she's been getting, that's what I was getting at, she was trying to say anyway. She says that sha'az niknasim ba hanai imo, the ima should be, v'nimshachim lo atzmos, and then the actual light itself comes into her, the pure light. It's not filtered through zer anpin, and mochim shadacha me'ima atzbach shalo derek zer anpin, v'al yadehim nigdalas ne'ez spheros. V'hevdel ben shtei hamshachos, so what's the difference between these two hamshachos? Who? Shehamshachah Rishona God Lachem Banuk the Shear Kuma. So the first Hamshachah, the Nuk grows up to the size, and let's see what he says. Hamshachah is a Rishon, and the God Lachem Nuk the Shear Kuma Shemecha Chaza the Lamanta. So she comes up to the Chaza level. Ve'ela b'hamshachah shniya, but when it comes into the second time, Negdela the Shear called Kuma says their anpen or called the Now, so we're going to look among. We're going to see that. There's a cough test here, and this will be, we have time to say that. Let's go over here to the light print. Kola Amor Khan Ku Klape Partsufi Yaakov Arel. Don't forget that, Yaakov Arachel. Shenegdalas Rachel Kashir Kumas Yaakov Bailu, she becomes his height. Umechan Takabakan as Yaakov b'shem Zah, but he using the word Zah. Shekain Yaakov Rachel Mukuvanim Zun Agatanim Kenoida. There also is Zun, but there's Zun Agatanim. And we'll get into this more next time with God's help. Call to. Thank you.